by destroying which are crucial for the survival of pregnant women and babies. And these are all listed as genocidal actions in the suit. So there's a whole range of actions which they're calling for an immediate cease on. And these are the provisional measures which South Africa seeks at the current time.
Maha Abdallah, you are a Palestinian genocide scholar. Can you explain the significance of this going to the International Court of Justice and how people are responding in Israel and Palestine?
Thank you for having me. This is a historic moment for the Palestinian people in their pursuit for justice and accountability. Decades after the imposition of a settler colonial and apartheid regime against the Palestinian people that has dispossessed and fragmented the Palestinians without accountability and with near total impunity. So the fact that Israel today stands on trial is very significant, very important. But of course, we recognize the possibilities and the different scenarios that are forthcoming. And the fact that Israel is on trial for the crime of genocide is also significant because as the application of the South Africa before the International Court of Justice states that the crime of genocide and the alleged genocidal acts and omissions by the state of Israel are part of a continuum. They do not happen in a vacuum. They're part and parcel of the ongoing Nakba imposed on the Palestinian people. And for that, there needs to be accountability. As for the reactions, unfortunately, I have not yet been able to interact with many people. The hearing session just finished, but I know that most of us Palestinians, whether in Palestine or in diaspora or in exile, we have been waiting for this moment, and all eyes have been on the ICJ on The Hague today, and we have been thinking about the Palestinians in Gaza and how they perceive the current hearing sessions. More than 90 days after complete devastation, more than 90 days after significant and extreme and severe loss, destruction, and pain inflicted on the Palestinians there for the purpose of the destruction of the group. And of course, we think of Palestinians in exile who have been also mentioned by the South African ambassador in his introductory remarks when he spoke about the deliberate denial of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, which includes the right of return for Palestinians in refugee camps across the neighboring countries.
So let me just turn, Maha, thank you for that, to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke Wednesday, one day before today's hearing at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, responding to the hearing.
I want to make a few points absolutely clear. Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population. And we are doing so in full compliance with international law. The IDF is doing its utmost to minimize civilian casualties, while Hamas is doing its utmost to maximize them by using Palestinian civilians as human shields. The IDF urges Palestinian civilians to leave war zones by disseminating leaflets, making phone calls, providing safe passage corridors, while Hamas prevents Palestinians from leaving at gunpoint, and often with gunfire. Our goal is to rid Gaza of Hamas terrorists and free our hostages. Once this is achieved, Gaza can be demilitarized and de-radicalized, thereby creating a possibility for a better future for Israel and Palestinians alike.
So that was Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Maha, if you could respond to what he said regarding the case that is now ongoing at the International Court of Justice.
I think this is a baseless statement, and the statements over the past 30
Kajal Ramjathan Kyo, I wanted to ask you about Hamas. It is a non-state player here. How does it fit into this decision? And also, because there isn't enforcement, what is the role particularly of the United States, since it sits on the UN Security Council, which of course is related to the International Court of Justice as a UN body?
Yes. The South African legal team set out very clearly the position of Hamas in this particular matter. And what they said in their submissions was that the International Court of Justice is there to adjudicate matters and cases between states. Hamas is not a state, and therefore Hamas is not part of this application. No claims have been brought against Hamas, and no claims can be brought against Hamas at this particular tribunal. There are other tribunals in which Hamas can be, crimes against Hamas can be brought, but this is not the appropriate tribunal for that particular issue. So that deals with the issue of Hamas. Talking about the US and their involvement in this case, the US, as we know, are longtime friends with Israel. In the event that there is a final decision made by the court, and the court makes findings on genocide and genocidal intent against Israel, of course, there is no immediate obligation on Israel to act on these findings, and we don't expect Israel to comply with these findings, which will then lead to the matter being presented to the UN Security Council to try and enforce this compliance. And at that point, with the US being a permanent member of the Security Council, they could, of course, use their veto powers to block any actions against Israel. So that would be a very serious challenge related to compliance of any findings of this court.
Kajal, apart from the UN Security Council, of course, the person who leads the International Court of Justice, of the 15 judges, the president is an American, Joan Donoghue, and the vice president is a Russian, Kirill Gevorgyan. So if you could say, I mean, ostensibly the judges are supposed to be impartial, but in the most recent case last year with Russia and Ukraine, the only countries to abstain from the vote, which was otherwise 13 people voted for Russia withdrawing from Ukraine, the provisional measure. China and Russia were the only two who did not. So if you could say, just in terms of precedence, do judges more or less make decisions that coincide with the policies of their countries, or is it the case that this is an exception?
Yes, so judges are supposed to be independent. We expect judges to be independent. Judicial independence is the cornerstone of all democracies. We require judicial independence to be able to support us to claim our rights and to claim our democracies. It's a hugely important means of protection. We've seen previously at the ICJ in the Ukraine v. Russia case, both the Russian and the Chinese judges offered dissenting opinions. I would very much hope that the American judge, the president of the court, does feel an obligation to be independent, properly independent in this matter. There is, of course, no guarantee of this. There is very little which can be done in the event of the American judge dissenting, making findings which are not in line with the majority of the court. And this is essentially the problem of the International Court of Justice, in that it can take on a relatively political slant in the decisions which it issues.
And now their terms are up. The American, she's had a number of positions at the State Department before Joan Donoghue, are up in February, so they could be up before this decision is released.
Court. There needs to be the People's World Court.
Is that right, Kajal?
Not a bunch of slant hit.
I'm not aware of when her term is up, so I can't really comment on that. But the fact that she's sitting on the issue of provisional measures means